If you take a hard look at the U.S. economy right now, just look at the raw data. The indicators are, well, they're flashing bright red.
They really are. We're seeing structural instabilities across almost every key metric that, frankly, demand immediate and really focused attention.
And we're not talking about small adjustments here. The sources we've been analyzing show that layoffs across the country are now on track to exceed the total job losses from the great financial crisis.
Yeah.
That's a benchmark I think we all hoped we would never, ever have to see again.
And that comparison, it's a truly staggering one, and it's really the starting point for what we need to get into today. The data shows 1.1 million jobs have already vanished. That's a 54% increase from the prior year. It's massive.
A 54% increase.
And if that trajectory holds, we're not just looking at some, mild recession. The projections suggest we could be approaching 2 million jobs lost before the end of the year.
And you have to remember, this is all happening while, for the average family, prices are soaring and affordability is just getting squeezed from every direction.
Right, so you have this economic cliff on one side, and then this unprecedented level of global risk on the other.
Okay, so that's the context.
Yeah.
The scale of the threat is immense. The house is, for all intents and purposes, burning down.
Mm-hmm.
But this is where the story gets so bizarre. This is the juxtaposition that just leaps out of the source material. While all of this is happening, the administration's public focus, its energy, seems to be consumed by, well, the trivial, the personal, the purely aesthetic.
Gold leaf, marble, decorations.
Exactly. That's where the attention is going.
And it creates this profound cognitive dissonance for anyone trying to analyze the situation. Economists, political observers, even people inside Washington, they're seeing a complete miscalibration of priorities at the absolute highest level.
Let's start with the most direct evidence of that, because the details are, they're almost unbelievable. We have documented accounts from a recent cabinet meeting. And this meeting was called to discuss truly monumental issues. You're talking about the Texas flooding tragedy, the wars in Ukraine and Gaza, the bombing of Iran, global tariffs. Issues that demand laser focus.
Absolute intellectual rigor from the entire leadership team.
Yet instead of that, the president reportedly diverted the entire conversation into what can only be described as a prolonged monologue on interior design.
He spent between 13 and 15 minutes of this critical meeting talking in excruciating detail about how he had personally decorated the cabinet room.
And it's the level of minutia that really sells it. This wasn't just a passing comment.
Oh, no. It was a performance.
He talked about selecting specific paintings, pulling them from, quote, the vaults. He talked about his love for the frames. There's a direct quote here. Look at those frames. I'm a frame person. Sometimes I like frames more than I like the pictures.
And it didn't stop there. He went into detail about overseeing the cleaning of antique china, the installation of these medallions on top of the lamps because the originals were missing a chain.
It's this fixation, not just on the placement of things, but on their authenticity, their value. Which brings us to the gold.
The gold, yes.
Yeah.
He actually launched into a debate with his cabinet members, asking for their input on whether he should gold leaf the corners of the moldings.
Why?
Because, and he insisted on this, they've never found a paint that looks like gold.
I have to pause on that for a second. In a room where decisions about nuclear safety, troop deployments, and a looming financial crisis are supposed to be made, the critical debate is about real gold versus high-quality paint on a decorative molding.
Precisely.
Yeah.
He even said that painting, it would be easy, but it won't look right. It's that need for the real spectacle, the authentic gold, even in the most insignificant place, that really sets the tone for everything we're about to discuss.
And this is all happening when, as you said, the world is demanding clear-sighted governance. The Council on Foreign Relations just put out their survey.
That's right. They've identified a number of high likelihood, high impact global conflicts. We're talking about major Russian military gains in Ukraine, the Israel-Hamas war continuing to escalate, potential direct conflict between Iran and Israel. These things demand an administration that is, running on all cylinders.
But instead, that energy is being channeled into personal aesthetics, into these vanity projects, and, as we'll see, into political purges. And it's that staggering contrast that we really have to get to the bottom of today.
So we need to look at three core areas that the source material really highlights. First, these mounting concerns over the president's cognitive function, the digressions, what experts call confabulation.
Right. Then second, the systematic destruction of the federal civil service, this thing called DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency, and Project 2025.
And finally, the strategic, almost authoritarian-style takeover of cultural institutions, with the Kennedy Center as the prime example.
Okay, let's start with the cognitive question. And I think it's important to frame this correctly. We have to remember the baseline. The previous administration, President Biden, faced just relentless speculation over his age and his acuity.
Absolutely relentless. And that scrutiny, especially after that debate performance in June of 24, was a huge factor in his decision not to seek re-election. So what's so striking now is the uneven application of that same level of scrutiny
to President Trump.
Exactly. At 79, he's been exhibiting some increasingly unusual public behavior, but often without that same degree of sustained critical examination. And this is despite multiple medical experts noting what they call a gross deterioration from someone's baseline and function.
So what does that deterioration actually look like in practice, according to these analysts?
Well, it seems to manifest as just a profound inability to maintain focus. We see tangential thinking, a failure of what you call self-regulation in a conversation.
So just jumping from topic to topic without any connection.
Exactly. Harry Segal, a professor at Cornell who specializes in this, he noted that Trump repeatedly exhibits digressing without thinking. He'll just switch topics without any self-regulation, without building a coherent narrative. It's like he can't steer his own train of thought back to the main track.
And the examples are, honestly, they'd be comical if the stakes weren't so incredibly high.
Right.
Take the meeting with Ursula von der Leyen, the European Commission president. They're supposed to be discussing really complex issues, starting with immigration. And then just abruptly, with no prompt, no logical bridge, the president pivots and launches into this unprompted 2-minute monologue about windmills.
And we need to be clear, this wasn't a policy discussion about, say, renewable energy.
Yeah.
This was a tirade built on these bizarre, totally unsupported claims. He's telling the astonished European leader that windmills drive whales loco. And that they kill birds. It was just a nonstop, unprompted rant that completely derailed a major diplomatic meeting.
And for the sake of clarity, the sources do the fact-checking on this. The number of birds killed by wind turbines is, objectively, minuscule compared to the number killed by, say, domestic cats or flying into power lines.
It's not even close. So it's not just tangential thinking. It's a disregard for verified data in favor of some, personal fixation.
Which is alarming enough in a diplomatic setting, but I think the most dramatic example of this is from a press conference where he was asked a pretty simple question.
What's your next campaign promise?
Right. And that one question launched a nearly 40-minute digression. 40 minutes.
An epic monologue.
About shower heads and water restrictors.
That's unbelievable. He complained over and over again. The quote is, the water doesn't come out. You have to stand in the shower for 20 minutes before you get the soap out of your hair.
40 minutes on water flow. It's not a policy detail at that point. It's an obsession with a tiny personal inconvenience that he's magnifying into a national crisis.
And he didn't stop there. He described washing his hands as horrible because of the lack of water pressure. And he concluded that these regulations were done by crazy people. It's just a remarkable insight into what consumes the limited attention span of the leader of the free world. Personal comfort seems to take precedence over, global economic collapse.
And we also see this difficulty with basic facts. When he was asked about the famine in Gaza and international aid, he claimed the U.S. gave $60 million and insisted flat out no other country gave anything.
Which was just not true. Simply false. The UK had already announced an $80 million aid package. The EU had allocated almost $200 million. So it wasn't just getting the U.S. number wrong, it was completely forgetting the significant contributions of key allies.
Which suggests a real difficulty in retaining recent complex data, the kind of data you absolutely need for high-stakes geopolitical decisions.
And this sort of gap-filling, this invention of reality, brings us to a specific psychological phenomenon that experts identified in the source material: confabulation.
Can you define that for us?
Sure. As it's defined in these assessments, confabulation is a neurological symptom. It's not lying in the conscious sense. It's where the brain takes a kernel of an idea, maybe a real memory or an emotional feeling, and adds these significant fabricated elements to it that just didn't happen.
So the person telling the story actually believes the invented parts are true.
That's the crucial distinction. And that's what makes it so concerning from a medical standpoint. The brain is inventing narratives to cover for memory gaps, and the subject believes them.
And the most prominent example of this is what's being called the Unabomber story.
Yes, the Unabomber story. The president has claimed on multiple occasions that his late uncle, Professor John Trump, taught Ted Kaczynski the Unabomber at MIT.
He even provided a quote, supposedly from his uncle, about how Kaczynski did as a student.
A very warm, reflective quote. But the story is impossible on several objective counts. First, his uncle died in 1985. Kaczynski wasn't publicly identified as the Unabomber until 1996.
So the timeline doesn't work at all.
Not even close. And second, Kaczynski never studied at MIT. Segal, the professor from Cornell, he notes that the story makes no sense whatsoever, but it's told in a very warm, reflective way, as if he's remembering it.
That comfort with an invented reality, that's what's so jarring. It suggests the cognitive function is deteriorating to the point of actually inventing reality.
So how are the medical professionals cited in the sources reacting to this whole collection of symptoms? The tangential thinking, the confabulation.
With alarm. Richard Friedman, a professor of psychiatry at Weill Cornell Medical College, said that any fair-minded mental health expert would be very worried. He said if a patient presented with this level of verbal incoherence, tangential thinking, and repetitive speech, the immediate next step would be a rigorous neuropsychiatric evaluation to rule out a cognitive illness.
And there are others. John Gardner, who's studied this public behavior for years, he points to footage of the president from the 1980s where he was extremely articulate.
And the contrast now.
Now, Gardner says he really has trouble completing a thought, and that is a huge deterioration. The consensus from these outside experts, just based on observable public behavior, it points toward a significant functional decline.
Which creates this huge clash between the medical assessment of a serious problem and the official political defense. Because if the person in charge is struggling with basic acuity, how can they possibly manage the complexities of the country?
The White House response has been, as you'd probably expect, aggressive denial. They've called critics left-wing mouthpieces. They cite the current White House physician, Dr. Sean Barbabella, who reported excellent cognitive and physical health.
And his former physician, Ronnie Jackson, who is now a congressman, he continues to insist the president is mentally and physically sharper than ever before. So it's a complete political stonewall against the professional assessment.
And that inability to manage complexity, paired with this demand for absolute loyalty, it leads us directly into the second massive issue we need to talk about: the execution of this unprecedented purge of the federal workforce.
Right. The largest disruption since the professionalization of the civil service over a century ago.
So now we're turning to the systematic deconstruction of government, orchestrated through Project 2025 and this new agency, the Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE.
And this isn't just random disruption, it's rooted in a very specific ideology.
You could call it the doctrine of destruction. Project 2025 laid out these incredibly detailed plans to shrink agencies, to effectively gut them, and replace career civil servants with political loyalists.
All driven by this core belief in a deep state that's actively working against the administration.
And the stated goal, from the architects themselves, is less about efficiency and more about making the government submissive. Russell Vought, a key architect of Project 2025, said something that is, frankly, chilling.
What was the quote?
He said, "We want the bureaucrats to be traumatically affected. We want to put them in trauma. The goal is to make them not want to go to work because they're increasingly viewed as the villains."
So the chaos is the point. The trauma is the goal.
It's not a bug. It's the central feature. And the mechanism for executing this trauma is the Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE, an agency designed for dismantling, headed by the campaign's largest single donor, Elon Musk.
Someone known for pushing privatization and automation in government services, who publicly celebrated the mass terminations.
The scale is just immense. We are talking about nearly 300,000 announced layoffs. That's 12% of the entire civilian federal workforce.
And the execution was done in stages, right? Designed to maximize instability and minimize legal challenges.
Exactly. The first and most important legal tool was the executive order implementing Schedule F. This is the technical piece that just fundamentally broke decades of civil service law.
Explain what that means. Before this, most federal workers were protected from being fired for political reasons, right?
Right. About 90% had what's called merit-based employment protections. Schedule F changed that. It reclassified tens of thousands of roles, policy-making, policy-determining roles held by career experts as at-will positions.
So it strips them of their job protections.
Instantly. It effectively makes these essential, nonpartisan experts into political servants who can be fired for any reason or no reason at all. It basically overrides 140 years of law designed to insulate technical expertise from politics.
And the immediate reaction to Schedule F was that a lot of people just left on their own.
A huge wave of them. The administration offered this deferred resignation deal, and about 75,000 workers took it by mid-February. They were essentially pressured or nudged to resign before the axe fell.
Which just accelerated the loss of institutional memory.
But the most deliberately cruel part of this, detailed in the sources, was the directive about probationary employees. These are workers who have been in their jobs for less than a year.
What happened to them?
The Office of Personnel Management, OPM, directed agencies to fire them and to cite inadequate performance as the reason.
Even if that wasn't true.
Even if there was zero evidence. Supervisors were explicitly told to cite inadequate performance, even if the employee had received stellar reviews, or in many cases, no reviews at all because they were so new.
So they were just manufacturing a reason to fire them.
They were. The dismissal letters were cold and stark. Things like, the agency no longer has a need for your services, or you're not fit for continued employment because your ability, knowledge, and skills do not fit the agency's current needs. It was a purge based on a desire for trauma, not on performance.
And the legal challenges to this didn't hold up.
The administration pushed very hard, and the Supreme Court ultimately overrode lower court orders that had temporarily frozen the firings. Politico described it as a major reversal in the pre-Trump conventional wisdom that federal workers enjoyed significant job protections.
So what does that mean for the future? Does it just gut the job security of the entire federal bureaucracy from now on?
It creates a new and I think very dangerous precedent. It signals that future presidents can use the threat of mass layoffs to pressure workers to carry out political orders, even when a federal judge, William Alsup, ruled that OPM acted illegally. He did. Yes, he confirmed the illegality of the process, but he refused to reinstate the workers. He basically said the Supreme Court had signaled it would just overrule him anyway. The courts are essentially conceding this is now an expansive executive power.
And the result of this rushed ideological purge has been, well, predictable chaos.
Absolute chaos on the ground. The obsession with trauma completely overshadowed the need for government to actually function.
What are some examples of that?
We saw agencies immediately scrambling to undo their own mistakes. The Department of Agriculture accidentally fired officials who were working on the national response to the H5N1 bird flu virus.
The bird flu?
Yes, they had to immediately try to rehire them once they realized the massive public health risk they had just created.
That's incredible.
And the National Nuclear Security Administration, which oversees our nuclear stockpile, they fired essential safety workers. A few days later, they had to unfire them after realizing the, catastrophic risk.
So the execution was completely haphazard.
It was. In many cases, supervisors couldn't even contact the people they'd just fired because their government email accounts were shut down instantly. The FDA had to rehire staff responsible for reviewing medical devices and food safety. This isn't just bureaucracy. It's operational self-sabotage that directly threatens public safety.
And it speaks directly to that core idea we started with. The energy is focused on the spectacle of disruption, the gold leaf, the trauma, not the continuity of governance.
You can't spend your time on windmill rants and shower heads one day and expect to run a complex federal machine the next. The focus is on the performance of efficiency, while the actual capacity to govern is intentionally being destroyed.
Okay, let's shift now to the human and systemic cost of this purge. Because it didn't affect everyone equally, did it? The sources point to a really troubling pattern of demographic targeting.
That's right, and it's linked explicitly to the administration's public war on DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives.
The data on this is really sobering.
It is. The analysis shows that the agencies with the highest planned cuts, where most of those 300,000 jobs were lost, were precisely the ones with the highest percentages of women, minority, and specifically Black employees.
So the correlation suggests the purges were targeted not just for political reasons, but along demographic lines.
It certainly appears that way. And the economic consequences for one group in particular are laid bare in the figures. Between the start of the year and June 2025, the sources show that more than 300,000 Black women left the labor force entirely.
An immense demographic shock.
And at the same time, white men saw the largest job increase of any group at 365,000. Experts like Christian Weller at American Progress have stated explicitly that these cuts disproportionately harm African Americans in the federal government.
And it goes beyond that, doesn't it? The sources also mention senior military officers who were women being disproportionately fired.
Yes, and this atmosphere of paranoia within the executive branch, fueled by these anonymous tip lines for staffers to report colleagues for being disloyal or having supposed liberal sympathies.
So this ideological destruction leads directly to the second major cost, the loss of institutional expertise. You're not just losing bodies, you're losing irreplaceable knowledge.
Decades of it. The mass departures included subject matter experts from every field. Scientists, seasoned intelligence analysts, experienced soldiers, all driven out. That's a loss of technical expertise you just can't replace quickly.
And that threatens vital public services.
Absolutely. Things like safety training for dangerous jobs, handled by the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health, the services that literally prevent accidents and deaths. The immediate impact is just a steep decline in America's ability to manage complex systems.
And many analysts are arguing there's a profit motive here beyond just the politics.
Yes, the Brookings Institution described the firings as explicitly setting the stage for greater privatization and automation. You bring in private contractors to fill the gaps left by the civil servants you just fired.
And this is where the conflicts of interest become really clear.
Overtly clear. Appointees in the new DOGE structure were leading these downsized agencies often had direct financial ties to the very companies that stood to benefit from privatizing government functions.
Is there a concrete example of that?
The best one is probably the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA. It handles all our vital weather and climate data.
Right.
Officials were appointed who had publicly advocated for and stood to benefit financially from the privatization of weather forecasting. They gutted the government expertise, then brought in people who wanted to hand that service over to private companies.
They privatized the expertise they had just intentionally thrown away.
Exactly. And beyond the systemic damage, we have to talk about the raw human toll. A Harvard Business School professor, Amy Edmondson, said the layoffs would create a climate of intimidation and fear for the workers who remained.
A psychological pressure cooker.
And the Washington Post reported on this extensively. Dozens of career civil servants suffering from acute psychological stress. We're talking panic attacks, severe depression, even suicidal thoughts. All because of this atmosphere of arbitrary firings and fear.
Russell Vaught's stated goal of putting bureaucrats in trauma.
It seems to have been devastatingly successful.
And this has a geographic impact, too. It concentrates the economic pain in certain areas.
It does. Federal hubs like the Kansas City area are feeling the cuts acutely. And of course, D.C., Maryland, and Virginia are facing continued weakness because of how reliant they are on federal jobs.
The Visa Regional Economic Outlook confirmed this, right?
It did. The combined effect of tariffs, immigration restrictions, and these layoffs is set to leave 11 states and D.C. with lower employment by the end of 2025. This isn't just an administrative act. It's a policy that delivers targeted regional economic damage.
So, as the core of the government is being torn apart and the president is distracted by gold paint, he's also focusing a lot of energy on controlling culture. Which brings us to our final area, the Kennedy Center takeover.
And the key here is to frame this correctly. Experts don't see this as some random quirk. They see it as a chapter right out of the authoritarian playbook.
How so?
An analysis in The Guardian notes that a preoccupation with the minutiae of the arts is consistently on the symptom checker for authoritarianism. They fear the power of culture, its influence on hearts and minds, and so they seek to control it.
And the takeover itself was incredibly swift and brazen. In February 2025, the president names himself chairman of the board.
Then he replaces 13 board members and installs his fiercely loyal operative, Richard Grenell, as interim president.
The goal was clear: seize control of the narrative of American culture by taking over its premier symbol.
And they immediately made a very visible political statement. They installed the president's and vice president's official portraits right next to the concert hall stage door, a complete break from tradition.
And then they went after the Kennedy Center honors.
Instantly. The president reportedly called previous honorees radical left lunatics and started floating names like Sylvester Stallone and Andrea Bocelli, people known for their political loyalty to him.
So a fundamental shift from recognizing artistic excellence to rewarding political alignment.
And his aesthetic pettiness even extended to cultural criticism. He publicly complained about the musical Hamilton,
which then withdrew from its scheduled 2026 run at the center.
Exactly. And he also made these bizarre complaints about a mouse infestation. It's a clear act of what critics are calling cultural purification.
But this takeover has had devastating, measurable effects on the center's finances. Ticket sales have just plummeted.
By nearly 50%. The numbers are stark. From September through October, 43% of tickets at the 3 largest venues went unsold.
And how does that compare to the year before?
In the same period in 2024, 93% of tickets were sold. This decline is financially worse for the center than its bounce-back year after the pandemic shutdown. The audience has voted with its wallet.
And that has huge ripple effects, right? It's not just about the lost ticket revenue.
No, Michael Kaiser, a former president of the center, warned that depressed sales bode unfavorably for future fundraising. Why? Because most of the center's big donors are also regular ticket buyers. If you alienate your audience, your fundraising apparatus just collapses.
And the staff and artists, they've pushed back.
Significantly. Nearly 10% of the staff was laid off. Employees are now trying to unionize under the Kennedy Center, United Arts Workers, to fight for cause employment. They're trying to escape the same at-will model being forced on the rest of the government.
We've also seen a pretty clear artistic exodus.
We have. The renowned soprano Renee Fleming cut ties immediately. The celebrated Hungarian pianist András Schiff canceled all his U.S. engagements, citing political changes and saying that artists must react to the horrors and injustices of this world.
And the political spectacle really came to a head when Vice President Vance showed up to an event.
And was greeted by a wall of booing. But Richard Grinnell's defense of this incident was, I think, even more revealing than the booing itself.
What did he say?
Grinnell, an official installed by an administration that was simultaneously banning federal diversity programs, he criticized the audience for its lack of diversity and tolerance of diverse political views.
That is just a magnificent piece of Orwellian logic. To dismantle diversity programs and then use the lack of diverse voices as a weapon against your critics.
And it all comes back, finally, to the gold leaf and the aesthetics. Even with the honors medallions, the new administration immediately snubbed the local artisan, James Baturin, who had crafted those iconic medallions since 1978.
And instead,
they outsourced the contract to the luxury brand Tiffany & Co. The White House publicly celebrated the new, far more classy design as a massive upgrade from the tacky rainbow sash design.
So deliberately insulting a local family business and celebrating the replacement of tradition with a luxury brand, all while claiming to be saving heritage.
It's the same pattern we've seen in every area, in governance, in economics, and in culture. The president's energy is channeled into controlling the narrative, the look, the loyalty, while the actual complex work of functional governance just collapses in the background.
So let's try to synthesize this as we close out. On one side, you have these immense compounding crises, an economic cliff that looks like the great financial crisis, soaring costs, an external world that the Council on Foreign Relations says is at its most perilous point in nearly 2 decades.
And on the other side, an administration dedicating its highest power and attention to, well, aesthetic fixes, spending cabinet meetings debating gold leaf, purging 300,000 workers to put them in trauma, and jutting a national arts center to install loyalists and luxury brands. The focus isn't on being functional, it's on looking powerful.
And I think understanding that dual reality, the obsession with controlling the look and feel, the marble and the metals, versus the wholesale dismissal of critical governance, that's absolutely key to grasping what's happening right now. It seems the administration's main priority isn't saving the country from external threats, but saving what it calls the country's heritage through renovations and purges.
Which leaves you with a final, and I think provocative thought to consider. What if this intense, all-consuming obsession with aesthetics, with the gold leaf and the classy design, what if that is the policy? What if the primary function of the spectacle, the performance, the purging of so-called tacky elements, is to provide this massive performative disruption that's designed specifically to mask the systemic deconstruction of the state that's happening right in front of us?
It redefines the entire purpose of power. Is it to govern a nation, or is it just to perform a continuous cultural and political cleansing? That, I think, is the profound question this all forces us to confront.